both JD and I coming into this one definitely thought there could be a little bit of a letdown coming in off the big North Carolina game. You've got the Clemson game coming up, and we couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, this was we thought the North Carolina game was a beatdown, and you were a game early. Maybe you were 2 games early because
Two games early.
This was not a contest. Any consideration. I mean, there was, I guess, some moments. I'll say this: the loudest the crowd got for Syracuse today was when Malik Brown checked into the game and they booed him. Other than that, there was like
I don't know what.
Not even there.
Jack, it was 2-2 in the beginning of the game. It was 4-4. And then they never looked back.
It was then 11-7, at which point J.J. Starling had all 7 points for Syracuse early on. And then there was a 3-point barrage, which started with Gangba to Evans in the corner, which was also set up by a nice screen by Malik Brown, freed up Evans in the corner. In between, Naheem McLeod did get a layup, and then there's 2 more 3-pointers. Evans found Proctor for 3, and then Proctor found Sion. It was just a total and complete team effort today by Duke, who just was dominant. I guess technically not start to finish, but, 7 minutes into the game, 5 minutes into the game, this was just to use your term, a beatdown.
Beatdown. So this is a game in which I, sometimes speculate whether the, basketball could use the hockey rule on assists, that in fact 2 players could gain an assist. There were so many things where there was an extra pass that the flow it was a thing of beauty. It was like listening to classical music. And I say that because at times you were even bored. So it was such a flow to it that it was it really was a clinic.
I wrote down, there was a play. I don't even think I got all the guys written down. But there was a play with like 13 minutes ago in the second half where it was like Foster to Flag to Sion to Malik Brown. I think there was another pass I missed in there. It was like 5, maybe even 6 passes, and it led to a Malik Brown layup or dunk. And I wrote down in my notes, it reminded me of the Spurs in 2014 when they beat the Heat, and their ball movement was just insane. Like, it was just everybody was touching it. It was flowing around the perimeter, inside, outside. Everyone was involved, and that's what it felt like for Duke, especially after the first handful of minutes. I know, we're texting each other, and you kept saying they haven't made an outside shot. All right, 2 segments. They haven't made an outside shot. And then all of a sudden, the 3-point barrage just took over. And Syracuse, they had no answers. The one thing, we did get a lot wrong, as you said. The one thing I did get right was that Eddie Lampkin was a complete liability defensively. And they attacked him all game long to the point where Naheem McLeod played his most minutes of the season because they just couldn't play Eddie Lampkin. He was just sitting in the drop, and Duke was either shooting a 3 or getting an easy bucket at the rim. It was just pick, whatever you wanted to do in that pick and roll defense against Syracuse. Cooper Flag was kind of doing whatever he wanted. So was Colin Knippel. So was Tyrese Proctor. Total team effort.
Well, it's so much so that at the 5-minute mark, Harris starts coming in. They team up. At one point,
Gangba and Mal. Yeah.
Right. Evans Um, a- and the guy from Stanford, you could pronounce it.
Begovic
Yeah, Begovic gets it. I mean,
and
this is what
and Hubbard.
and Hubbard. Yep. So I will say this is clearly a departure from the Coach K era. He does not have any problem when the score gets big to start using players that he wants to know he can rely on. So Gangba, Foster started to show some life here. I kind of like that. He did have his pocket pick once or twice, but but at least he was part of the game. And that's very important when you're trying to bring yourself back, that you feel that you were part of the game and
And
not just sitting.
and just to add to that, you could tell the Duke, like the team, because they're, I mean, at this point, I think we all can tell they're a very connected group. And like Foster gets his layup, the bench like pops off. Foster had a turnover. There's like three guys who came to come pick him up, tap him on the back. They're making a concerted effort to pick up Mr. Foster and let him know that he's a part of the team and they need him to perform better. And Coach Shire, I think it's like every other game you hear him say, we really need Caleb Foster to get going. Like he's been on it consistently throughout the year.
I think one of the interesting points made by one of the play-by-play announcers was that
Kevin Brown. We should. The only reason we should know at this point is because I think it was the Georgia Tech game. At this point, he was the play-by-play guy with Jim Boeheim, and it was a tough.
That was a tough
right,
game.
Tough game for Brown. And one of somebody commented and said it was Kevin Brown, and he also does Orioles baseball. And ever since I've seen him, do a few other games, he's pretty good at play-by-play. And I typically don't like commentators. So that's I feel like I'm giving him a lot of praise right there.
So Kevin Brown made a really interesting point with regard to first of all, I will give him absolute credit for saying that that Dickie V will be doing. He'll be the third announcer, as it turns out, with Corey Alexander and his partner now for the Clemson game. So once he gave the good recognition to Dickie V, I thought that made me feel really good. But he was also saying how Darren Harris, who was the 45th overall McDonald, something like that.
Not McDonald's, but depending on where you look, somewhere between 30 and 40-ish.
ESPN or something.
There's a few different sites.
And he's saying this guy's got to try to do anything to break through this lineup, and he's so good. And Darren Harris chipped in 4 points, I think. So, hey, Jack, why don't you take us through these stats for the game for Duke?
Yeah, and just before I do that, I caught that too, and it's funny because Evans is a top 20 recruit, and while he's in the rotation now, we all know as Duke fans, it took a few games for him to cement himself, and even still. He got more playing time today because Mason Gillis wasn't available. Classic Duke, by the way. Find that out a few minutes into the game. No idea.
There will be no Mason Gillis tonight. What? Where did that come from? But you know what? It gave Mason's 12 minutes to someone else.
Yes, it did. And I hope he is feeling better because I do think we are going to need him at Clemson, which is going to be a raucous environment with a loud crowd at Clemson there. All right, stats. Let me configure this a little bit better. drop. All right. So it's not perfect, but it will work. We got the Duke stats up there for you guys. Kama Malawach, we'll just go from the top. 6 points, a couple rebounds. Let's see. Cooper Flagg only had 11 points.
Wait. Common, how many blocks? Because as a team, they were at least 8, maybe even more.
According to ESPN, they have us at 6 blocks.
No. We were I was counting that too. We were at least at 8, but ESPN stats.
They leave a lot to be desired.
Totally. Go ahead.
I was trying to get the ones from Duke's website, but I couldn't pull it up. Let's just move on. All right, Cooper.
It must be the budget cuts at ESPN.
They've been having some difficulties. Cooper with his lowest scoring game since he's turned 18. I think that's right. And it didn't. I mean, Duke won by 29. I think it's a classic Cooper Flagg that in a game where Duke wins by 29, he's got 11. That just is so in line with what we've seen from him.
Thank goodness he got to double figures.
We're really concerned. I mean, and he got there emphatically. The dunk, the pump fake.
Over the 7'4" guy.
I wouldn't say over, more like around, in my opinion. Because he pump faked and then he drove around him. That's where he got the space. If it would have been over him, I know Jay Williams was talking about Vince Carter's dunk in the Olympics over, I think it's Frederick Weiss, who was also 7'4", but that was, or it's 7'3", somewhere in there. But he literally jumped over him. That's a little bit different.
It's absolutely correct. However, at 7'4", he could have at least put up an arm for some contest, a foul, something. But
I don't blame him.
Add to the highlight reel.
It's one per game at this point, and that was certainly one of them. Con Knipple, 12 points. A lot of his scoring was in the first half, and then he scored to start the second half, and that was pretty much it. I wish I had the minutes. I would be surprised if anybody played more than 30 minutes today. Proctor, leading scorer, 16 points for him. He was very aggressive early, and it was good to see. 4 for 10 from the three-point line for Proctor. 10 points from Sion James. Also 3 steals. Really good game from Sion James. Malik Brown. He didn't get double figures. I was wrong. But he did get 6 points, 8 rebounds, an assist, 3 steals, and a block. I mean, he was everywhere.
And the stat that's not there, deflections. The minute within seconds of coming into the game, there was an inbounds pass, which he deflected.
Isaiah Evans, 10 points, 4 assists, and he had a highlight dunk. One of the rare buckets for Isaiah Evans. Yeah.
Brought the hammer down.
I mean, I think they had him at 86% of his shot attempts have been from three-point line, which is very similar to Raiden Smith from Louisville. I mean, I do think Isaiah Evans can score more inside, so it was nice to see him attack the bucket, albeit in transition. As you said, Darren Harris had 4 points in some late minutes, but good to see him get out on the court. Caleb Foster, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, also a couple of turnovers. I think he may have actually had 3 turnovers. Mixed bag for Mr. Foster today, but good to see some positives. So he's got things to build on moving forward. Gangba, 2 points, 1 rebound, 2 assists, and a steal. Thought he was solid. I thought he was just solid minutes from Mr. Gangba. That's pretty much it. Begovic and Hubbard got into the game late. Anything else before we move on from the stats?
Just could you give me the full line on Cooper Flag.
Cooper Flag, 11 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks. And the thing about the blocks, those were both on 3-point attempts. It's just he does something like every game where it's like it's hard to comprehend how much better he is at basketball than anyone else his age or a year older. Like, it's just, I said this last time, but I start to run out of words to describe Cooper Flag and how good he is. And I think compared to other programs, or shows, we certainly talk about him less than other people. I think because we know you guys see the same thing. A lot of it is, as Jay Williams said at a certain point when they were showing his dunk, I don't need to say anything. You guys can just watch it. And I think we're all watching it, and there's not much left to be said. Duke, I will say, to wrap up the stats, shot 56% from the field, 39% from three, and only had 6 turnovers. It's just an outstanding offensive performance.
I believe the announcer said, but I don't know if you can see it in your stats, they shot a stunning 69% from the field in the second half, which is that's crazy.
It is crazy. All right. Let me talk about some of the keys for a second. I want to pull up our predictions from last game and see who is the closest while we're still live here.
Look, at times we thought that the game was almost words like boring, not interesting, Duke took control, that was the game. But then it dawned on me that what we were watching was truly a master class in defense. They held Syracuse to 54 points again. I mean, this is just another incredible defensive performance where the opponents are struggling to get off a shot. You know, most of their shots came from fadeaways or double pumps. It really they never could find a rhythm. And on offense, the flow of the ball, it was better than you could design it. You go here, you go there, we'll get you there. This is like watching maybe ice hockey, in the sense of, I'm going to pass it to you here, you're going to go over here, puck's going to go here, then there, and then we'll score. And so the combination of the flow of the ball in offense, the incredible defense, I realized this isn't boring. This is the master class on how it should be done. And especially when it could have been a letdown after the beatdown of UNC, there is now, I'm going to say it's different. Going into the Clemson game, there is a lot of momentum. You know, if this game had turned out differently, but to do this 2 games in a row, a lot of momentum going in. And Clemson lost that triple overtime game to Georgia Tech, who's playing really well as of late. So Clemson, it's a must win, and they're a good team playing against a great team. So it's going to be very interesting to see, and I'll save that for our pregame show later.
Yeah, it is a very interesting game to look ahead. All right, I was trying to tally up the numbers live here so we can get out our winners. I definitely have some work to do on how I'm going to approach this, because I realized you can kind of go 2 ways. You can go who is closest on the spread and who is closest on the total points.
Right.
Okay. So closest on the spread, there's no contest. Jay to the Shua 885. Close on the spread. He had it Duke 100, Syracuse 71. So he nailed it. Yes, yes. Clap it up for Jay to the Shua. Nailed it. All right. Closest on the total points scored. Ed Sessoms. He had Duke 84, Syracuse 61. Yeah, 145 total points. It was 137. Pretty damn close by Ed right there. And between you and I, you were closest on the total. You had it at 100. You're the closest of anybody. 141 points. As far as I could tell, I went through it quickly. Could have missed somebody. I apologize. And I was closest on the spread. I had it at 16, but neither one of us were in the ballpark. So I think maybe that's, well, I'll tinker with it for the preview for Clemson. I'll try to have it more ironed out. We can talk about it before the next show. So that way it's a little bit more clear who wins and everything. But I do think this makes it a little bit more fun. All right.
Medals.
Yeah, medals, and then we'll go to the chat. So medals. This was a tough one. I think there's 6 guys who deserve consideration. Cooper Flagg, certainly. Con Knipple, Tyrese Proctor, Sion James, Isaiah Evans, Malik Brown. I think any of those 6 guys, I can't blame you if you have them on the podium. I'm going to go with the gold today, Tyrese Proctor. I thought he was aggressive early on. I thought he looked for his shot and he hit some early buckets to get Duke going. I thought his defense was good as always. I'm going with Tyrese Proctor for the gold. Silver, Malik Brown. In his homecoming game, he gets booed early. I was hoping he'd get to double figures. Didn't quite get there, but he was still everywhere. Defensively, and he had some nice passes offensively. He was part of the ball movement. He had a really good game today against Syracuse. The bronze. This is tricky. I'm going to do something that I'm not even sure I agree with, but this is what we're going to do. Bronze medal today, Isaiah Evans. We're going to give Isaiah Evans, we're going to put him on the podium. He had 10 points. He had 4 assists. He had a nice dunk. And more importantly, I thought he really competed defensively. Again, I thought his defense has been, I understood early on, you watch some of the early games, you could kind of see why Coach Shire wasn't playing him. But I think his defense and his physicality has really ramped up as the year has gone on. So I'm leaving Cooper Flagg off the podium. I'm sure he's okay with it. He's got enough gold medals sitting at home. And that's how we're going to leave it for today.
I think there's controversy already. I told you I would have given the gold to the team because I thought this was a masterclass, as I described earlier, in both offense and defense. And therefore, it takes it away from that. And then I'd give the silver to Malik Brown because the second he comes into the court, he deflects it. His presence in the court, there is no question that Syracuse was going to send a message, and there was a flagrant one, and then there was another. It's almost like the next play, a hard foul on him, and then his teammates made certain that he could send a message back. He had a great killer dunk. And so I give him the silver, and then I would give Proctor the bronze. So I kind of differ with you tonight, but okay.
Yeah, you still had 2 of the same people, and you picked the entire team
for
one. So you're not differing too much. Okay. I guess I'm glad you brought up the Malik Brown flagrant foul because that was a little bit testy. And the one thing that I think is important to note is the guy who did it, Lucas Taylor, did not play with Malik Brown. But the thing on that play, for me personally, it's just kind of confirms what I thought about Malik Brown, which is he might be a quiet guy, but he does play with a bit of an edge, especially defensively. And I don't think he said anything, but his eyes, you could see him look at Taylor like almost like saying like, "Are you serious, dude? Like, what are you doing?" You know. But yeah,
Because I think Taylor bent down to try to pick him up after the play.
yeah, he wasn't
And
having it.
he wasn't having it, not
No.
one bit. And so,
Yeah, listen, we've it's been 2/3 of a season with Malik Brown, but that guy he's a fierce competitor. He may not say a lot, but he shows it. All right, let's check the chat. So
you know what? You know what, Jack? Since I make a point every time of saying we don't have the strength of schedule that the Big 12 and the SEC have, and so I'm a little worried about that come tournament time. But to your point about Malik Brown, and as I said very early on in the season, Malik Brown, Sion James, Mason Gillis. Those three guys are going to physically, I mean, and not to mention when Mal gets going, say, don't you bring that ball in here, and he blocks it, or Coop blocks 3-point shots when he's 6 feet away. So I'm beginning to think as they.
I was just gonna add.
Wait, let me just finish.
Go ahead.
As they continue to bond as a team by having those three guys, they are. I am getting less and less worried about the tournament and the fact that they're not playing against the number top 20 teams every night, 25 teams. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to add, you reminded me, Evans had a nice block on a 3 in the start of the game. Okay, chat. Brody Swing. Love when the whole team ran to pick Foster up. This is the most together Duke team I've ever seen. For me, the only other team I would throw out there, and this is a good comparison to have, would be the 2014-15 Duke team with Tyus Jones and Quinn Cook. They were so together that their hairstyles all became the same, and it became known as the Duke starting 5 haircut because they all had the same haircut. So I think that team was pretty together. It wasn't as deep as this team, especially after Suleiman was dismissed from the program. They only had 8 guys, but that's a good team to be compared to, and I agree. Besides that team, I can't think of any other like this.
No, if I start going back all the way in history, and I'm thinking about the championship teams with Bobby Hurley, Christian Laettner, and Grant Hill, there were a lot of personality issues, but they bonded on the court when they won back-to-back championships. But they were under the surface there. There were some issues, some egos, some things like that. But I do welcome comments like we got last time of some from our listeners who do know the Duke history better than I, that if they could say there's a better team. And I want to just add one more point to that, Jack, which is part of what's going on here is we sometimes don't give all that much or talk that much about the amazing coaching job that John Shire is doing by stitching together. All he had was 2 players back from last year, and one of them is barely getting playing time. And I also think this is a difference very much in the coaching style of Coach K versus John Shire. Coach K would always make it clear, I'm in charge. And John Shire, while he is coaching and clearly with his assistants, going to have a game plan for every game and everything. He has allowed the players to bond as a team, which is one of the reasons. It's another reason, actually, that they can go very, very far in March Madness, because they all care each other. So that was a really good comment about how everyone went to pick Foster up.
It was. And I'll add to your point there on Shire. I think part of the reason why it's different than Coach K in terms of his style is, I mean, he's been a head coach for 3 years. Coach K was the Duke head coach for well over 30 years. And I think that's part of it. But the other thing is Coach Shire, it was one of his most recent interviews, he mentioned how with this team, he is much more like interactive with them in practice settings. Instead of being like, here's what I want you to do, it's much more of a back and forth. Now, in terms of like, here's what I think, what do you think, right? Like, and they kind of bounce ideas, right? But then he did say, but when the games are on, it's whatever I say goes, kind of is what the gist was. But I think, to your point, that builds confidence within the team, and that it's not all coming from Shire. Like, I'm sure some ideas come from like Sion or Mason Gillis or Cooper, and then Shire figures out how to implement them so it's best for the team, but they're not all coming from him. And I'm also very confident that a lot of stuff comes from his assistants, whether that's Jay Lucas or Chris Carrawell. Like, it's a total collective effort from this Duke team and coaching staff, which, to your point, is really remarkable how well they've gelled together, considering they've got one guy and at this point like a quarter of a guy from last year in terms of playing time. In terms of continuity, and you've basically got an entirely new team. And it took them, they didn't close the Kentucky game, the Kansas games well, but they did close that Auburn game. And really ever since then, outside of a couple of scares with Wake Forest and NC State, it's been onwards and upwards.
I would think there's one other point, which is John Shire as a coach is also John Shire championship Duke player. And so when he is out there during practice and he's suggesting, here's what I want you to do, here's the way to run the play, this is what you're listening to. Yes, never take anything away from Coach K and 40 years and 5 championships, but having Coach Shire out there as someone who says, it wasn't that long ago that I won a championship here, and this is how you do it. Although that might have gone the other way had the last Butler shot,
Yeah. He, well, I mean, to that point, after the last game against North Carolina, what was the stat? The last time there was 2 Duke players with 15 points and 15 assists was Shire and Nolan Smith, right? So, it's not like he's got to look too far back to say, hey, he doesn't have to go to VHS tapes and maybe DVDs,
Nope.
or Blu-ray, but it's not like it's been such a long period of time. Okay. Lawrence. All right, let's actually stay on this topic right now before we get to Lawrence. Brody came back and he said he agreed with what we were talking about in terms of the 2015 team. And then he said, did y'all hear that Shire said this was the least interested team in social media he's ever had? That is huge in today's world. These kids just want to compete and win for one another. And yeah, I mean, it starts certainly with Cooper Flagg, who, when they had him on the podcast, they had him on an episode with Rachel Baker, who has gotten a lot of attention, especially of late, with Hubert Davis saying, we need to hire a GM. And Coach Shire's like, yeah, we did that 3 years ago. Um, but she's been great and really important. And on the podcast with Cooper, she said, part of her job as the GM is helping these guys navigate, NIL. And she said, with Cooper, it'd be really weird if he was posting all the time and getting a whole bunch of deals, and it just wouldn't make sense because that's not Cooper. And she said, with Jared McCain last year, it made sense. That's Jared McCain. And I don't think I think we've got to be careful in terms of like how we phrase this conversation, just because Jared McCain may be the most interested in social media of any player that I know. And he was also one of the most competitive players and the best player on last year's Duke team. So I think you can do both, but I think with certain guys it can be a distraction. I don't think it was with Jared McCain. I think it may have been with other people. I don't know. He's not necessarily referring to anybody in particular, but he is stating that could have been an issue in the past. And then I just want to say that about Jared McCain, because I think it's easy to look into on the surface level, see that comment and kind of reflect back on Mr. McCain, but I don't think that had any effect on his competitiveness on the basketball court, because he was the highest level competitor on last year's team.
I heard the comment during the game, and thanks for bringing it up in the chat. This whole era of NIL, I'm sure you noticed, Jack, Leonard Hamilton announced his retirement. So that's another longtime ACC coach, and one of the issues there is he was being sued for the failure to live up to the NIL payments that he had promised the players. This is just a whole other era, and I think the way that Duke has navigated this, because as I said, when I was at K Academy, and it was after the last year that Coach K had coached and he was coming back, one night he stood up and he said, it's time that I knew it was time for me to be done, because I can't put together the portal, NIL, recruitment, and the way that Duke went about this by hiring a general manager and sort of setting the bar high to say we need someone who can manage this, and then have Jay Lucas do what Jay Lucas does best, which is sort of look for recruits and look for the players to bring in. And then John Shire has to sort of figure out how do you put it together on the court, but relieving John Shire of some of that other responsibilities in this new era of college basketball. So
it was great timing. And I guess just to go back through the point from Brody, like just going through the roster quickly one by one. Obviously, it starts with Cooper Flagg. He's not interested in social media. Con Knipple, he's not interested in social media. Sion James, I mean, I guess he is, but it's only to promote his foundation, which he does nonprofit work. I mean, what a guy. It just, shout out to Sion James Foundation. You've got Tyrese Proctor. I'm sure he posts some stuff, but he's, very rare. Kaman Malawach, does he have an Instagram? I don't know. Isaiah Evans is the only guy who I know has one, but all the stories you hear about Isaiah Evans are, hey, Coach Shire, I want to work on my defense. What do I need to do? How do I get better so I can get more playing time? Like, what do you need from me, right? Like, you just go, Mason Gillis, Malik Brown barely talks. You go down the list. These guys are just, it's just not what they're interested in. So it makes sense.
Let's keep in mind that everything we see about Cooper Flagg is that he is not interested in that. But he does have somewhere between 700,000 and 1 million followers on his Instagram account. So it's not like the audience hasn't been built for him. But you wonder, based on what you're saying, is Rachel helping him navigate that? And he's just saying, I just got to let my game do my talking, and that's all I have to do.
Well, from the podcast, that's my inclination. I'm not sure what would be the right term to use
Well,
there. Yeah, both could work, I guess. But that's her responsibility, to make life easy on these guys, help them get the deals that make sense, and just be a helping hand, because it's obviously this is a very new thing. It's only been 3 years or so. So,
3 years.
and with Cooper, he's got a lot of attention to manage. It's not quite Zion level of interest, because I think Zion had over 2 million before he got to Duke, which is just insane. But still he's got around 1 million, which is a lot. Like, that's just a ton. So
How many do you have?
Not nearly that many. Take off a few zeros. All right, let's all right. Brody says, and then we'll get to Lawrence Freeman. Brody says McCain was a dog on the court and one of my favorite players last year, but I do like the old school rawness, toughness of this team. Could you imagine Malik Brown dancing on TikTok? No, I could not. That's a funny point. There's a video earlier where they were singing like Happy Birthday for somebody, and Malik Brown was trying to participate, but you could tell it really wasn't his thing to sing or dance or chant. All right, Lawrence Freeman. JD is right. ESPN shorted us some blocks. There you go. Someone is on the same page as you. And
thank you, Lawrence.
And he also said our post-denial defense took Syracuse out of anything they wanted to do in the first half, and Khan's 3 to start the second half took the rest of the fight out of them. Yeah, I think they had like a turnaround jumper after that, but to Lawrence's point, this was a team that just didn't. They had a first effort. There didn't seem to be much of a second effort there. That's unfortunate.
I didn't even see it from the coach, but
yeah, right. Like Hubert Davis, at least he tried everything, right? Like he went through different lineups, different defenses, whatever. He was throwing out the kitchen sink. But the biggest change from Coach Autry was taking Lampkin out and putting in McLeod. Although I guess in fairness, he doesn't have as many options as Davis.
No, but since Lawrence Freeman's with us, that's 12 in a row, baby. 12 in a row in running the table, and I'll forever give you the credit of sort of starting that for us to pay attention to. So it's 12 in a row, and we'll get a test when we're at Clemson on Saturday for certain.
For certain. And we'll be back tomorrow night dropping that preview for the game at Clemson. That's a big one. It's, I would argue, the biggest game, certainly the biggest conference game outside of the North Carolina game left on the schedule. It's
and the two unexpected games.
What's the other?
Where we very close game, and the game where we were.
I said left on the schedule.
I know, but I'm just saying that there were two games in which we got tested that we didn't see it coming.
Fair point. All right, last chat, quality touch, easy work, guys. Loved it. Thanks for chiming in. So, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow night with the preview against Clemson. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe, share it with a friend, and let us know what you guys think. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Peace.